Hi, my name is Amber Nelson, and today I'll be walking you through the key British acts that pushed the American colonies towards revolution, starting with the Sugar Act and ending with the Intolerable Acts. I'll also explain how something as basic as distance played a surprising big role in the growing divide between Britain and its colonies. In the years following the French and Indian War, Britain faced massive war debt. To solve this problem, Parliament passed a series of laws during the 1760s and 1770s aimed at controlling colonial trade and raising revenue. These laws weren't just about managing the empire, they were designed to help Britain recover financially. But the colonists didn't see it that way. They believed these laws were an unfair way for Britain to profit off them. Since colonists had no elected representatives in Parliament, they had no voice in how they were taxed. This sparked the powerful protest slogan, no taxation without representation. Let's walk through some of the key acts and their impact on the road to the revolution. The Sugar Act was a turning point. It wasn't just about regulating trade anymore. It was the first British law intended to raise money directly from the colonies, shifting away from the previous policies. This marked a major change in Britain's approach to colonial rule. While the act lowered the tax on imported molasses from sixpence to threepence per gallon, it also increased enforcement dramatically. Smuggling had been common under Britain's earlier policy of solitary neglect, but now custom officials and tax agents were cracking down and merchants were furious. To enforce it, Britain also used vice admiralty courts, which had no jurors. Colonists saw this as a denial of their legal rights under English law. The economic impact was especially hard on New England, where merchants depended heavily on molasses for the rum trade. The backlash helped spark early conversations about rights and representation, laying the groundwork for later resistance. Next came the Currency Act, which banned the colonies from issuing their own paper money as legal tender. This upset many colonists, especially debtors who had relied on paper currency to pay off what they owed more easily. British merchants, on the other hand, welcomed the law. They believed colonial money was unstable and losing value too quickly. While it may seem like a financial issue, this law had major political consequences too. It also seen as another way Britain was tightening control, but also built on earlier legislation passed in 1751, but now extended to all the colonies, not just New England. The Stamp Act marked the first time Britain tried to directly tax internal colonial life. It required colonists to buy and use stamped paper for newspapers, licenses, legal documents, and even playing cards. This touched nearly every colonist, from merchants to lawyers to everyday citizens, which made resistance more broader and more intense. Britain argued that the tax helped pay for soldiers still stationed in the colonies after the French and Indian War, but the colonists say it was an attack on their political rights. This led to widespread protests, boycotts, and mob actions. The Sons of Liberty, a secret group formed to resist British rule, emerged during this time. Later that year, representatives from 9 colonies met at the Stamp Act Congress, showing the first signs of intercolonial unity. Under pressure, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in 1766, but passed the Declaratory Act at the same time, asserting full authority to make laws for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The Townshend Acts placed new taxes on everyday imports like glass, paper, paint, lead, and tea, items used by colonists of all classes. In response, the colonies revived boycotts of British goods, showing just how powerful economic protests can become. Worse, revenue from these taxes was used to pay British officials in the colonies, which undermined local colonial governments who had traditionally controlled these salaries. As resistance grew, Britain sent more troops to enforce the law, especially in Boston. which only raised tensions further and eventually led to events like the Boston Massacre in 1770. Though most of the township taxes were repealed, the tea tax remained, setting the stage for the next major flashpoint. The Tea Act wasn't a new tax. It was actually meant to lower the price of tea by letting the struggling British East India Company sell directly to the colonies, skipping over colonial merchants. But colonists saw this as a trap. If they bought the tea, they'd be accepting Parliament's right to tax them without representation. Plus, colonial merchants were cut out of the deal, which made them furious. The result in Boston, colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor in what became known as the Boston Tea Party. British response to the Tea Party was swift and harsh. Parliament passed what they called the Coercive Acts, but colonists renamed them as the Intolerable Acts because of the severity. The Boston Port Act closed the harbor until the tea was repaid, crushing the city's economy. The Massachusetts Government Act took away local control, strengthening the royal government's power and limiting town meetings. Even though these laws were aimed at Massachusetts, they united the colonies in support. Other colonies sent aid, and leaders came together to form the First Continental Congress, a major step forward towards the resistance. Finally, let's not forget about the role of distance. Communication between Britain and the colonies took months, creating delays, misunderstandings, and frustrations on both sides. British leaders often made decisions with little understanding of daily colonial life, while colonists felt ignored and unheard. Over time, the distance helped colonists build their own identities, not just as British subjects, but as Virginians, New Yorkers, and Americans. The more Parliament tried to assert control, the more colonists imagined a different path. All of these laws, the Sugar Act, the Currency Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, and the Tea Act, and the Intolerable Acts, were meant to raise money and reassert imperial control, but instead they sparked a widespread resentment, protest, and unity among the colonists. And while Parliament believed it had the right to govern, the colonists believed that they had the right to consent. The disagreement grew into a powerful idea. The government should exist with the people's approval. The idea had eventually ignited the American Revolution. And here are the works cited page on top, and all the images are on the bottom. Thank you for joining me.